Hey, how you doing, econ students? This is Mr. Clifford. In fact, I'll jump from the side. Here we go. Hey, how you doing? This is Mr. Clifford. How you doing? It's time to get ready for the big AP test we have. 2 weeks. Got 2 weeks to get ready for this. First thing, if you haven't already done so, maybe leave a comment there on YouTube. I want to make sure the audio is good, so tell me it's working. If I can't see me or having some sort of problem, it'd be great to know right now. I am going to read some of your comments, and I'm going to answer a lot of your questions you guys have as we move forward. But keep in mind that it's going to take time for me to get to some of those questions. So just be patient, okay? Be patient. So here we go. Let's jump into this thing. All right. So let's talk about strategy, right? You got to think about economics and passing this test go together, right? So I want you to use economics as you pass this test. The goal is to get not 100%, right? If the goal is 100%, then you would spend your time on the little tiny details, trying to work out the really hard stuff. But that's not what you have to do, right? You have to get the easy questions right. That's what you have to focus on. So this is a breakdown of the actual AP test. It tells you what you need to pass. I know some of you guys are looking for 5s and 4s. That's great. But keep in mind, for some of you, the goal is just get a 3, just to pass, get that college credit. And, that's what, 53%, right? You know 53% of this stuff. You've got it, right? You got to know the key graphs. You've got to know the key concepts. The AP test asks the kind of same questions over and over again. So the most important thing is keep in mind, if there's something that you suck at, then don't worry about it. You can miss like 10 multiple choice questions on the AP test and still just be totally fine. So that's the first thing I want to point out. As we move forward, I want you to keep in mind a couple things. These are the 5 key graphs. There's 5 key graphs that you absolutely have to know. And the good news is, in macroeconomics, there's less graphs, right? So there's only 5 graphs. That's it. And they're going to ask it. 5 key graphs. Almost every single time it's aggregate demand and supply. It's like 90% of the time they ask about that. Then the Phillips curve. Notice both aggregate demand and supply and the Phillips curve are graphs that show where the economy is, right? And the economy can only be in one of 3 places. It can be a recessionary gap, full employment, or an inflationary gap. Now, I'm going to draw all these graphs. I'm going to cover all these concepts when I get on the board in a few minutes. I'm going to give you some multiple choice questions to work as well. But for now, I just want you to recognize there's 5 key graphs that you absolutely have to know. Now, the first 2, they're where is the economy? The other ones, for example, the money market is about, using monetary policy. Like, how does the Fed control the money supply, and what does that do to interest rates, and how do interest rates affect aggregate demand and speed up or slow down the economy? So that's the money market graph. The loanable funds market, which is what I think is going to be on the AP test this year, is a graph that's kind of like the money market, except it's the supply and demand for loans, right? So it's actually an easy graph, but you got to know it. A lot of teachers don't get to it, and it's kind of off to the side. It's not a main key graph, but it's one of the 5 you need to know. And of course, there's foreign exchange that shows the relative exchange rate between 2 different countries. So you have to be able to show, what happens to the value of a dollar relative to the yen, and increased demand, decreased demand. That's it. So I am going to draw all those graphs. We're going to go over it. Keep in mind, you can go to my website, acdcecon.com, to get a breakdown of each one of the 3 responses and how often they ask it. So what I did is I organized the last, 15 years of AP tests, 3 responses, and so, okay, here's how often they ask this question or that question. It makes it a whole lot easier to figure out what to learn and what to do if you just look at what they ask. So just check out what they ask, and I think you'll be fine. All right, so the next thing on our list, I'm going to give you the 12 key skills. I just gave you the 5 key graphs. Here are the 12 key skills of this. So here we go. 12 key skills of macro. Number 1. Now, I want to point out, back up. Remember I showed you the 5 key graphs? What's not on the list is the production possibilities curve. They have asked it on the test, but I didn't put it on the list because it's kind of an easy thing. The production possibilities curve, just that curve, the curvy one. This pretty crappy graph, but you get the idea. It's just not a hard graph, so I didn't put it on our list, but it could be asked in the test. Anyways, back to the key skills. To do well in the 3 responses and the multiple choice, they ask the same sort of things over and over again. So first one, be able to identify comparative advantage in terms of trade. Now, the AP micro test has never asked a comparative advantage question. They've never asked one on the micro test. but the macro has, and they kind of do it, every 3-4 years. So you're going to see that comparative advantage. Make sure you can take it all the way, figure out who can produce what, who should specialize in what, and then also how much should they trade each thing for. It's called terms of trade. Also, make sure you can do calculating GDP, like what's included, not included, and the GDP deflator. Also, make sure you can do identify who's hurt and helped by inflation. So if there's anticipated inflation, who's helped, who's hurt. Notice none of these things are hard. Like none of these ones are like, oh, I can't do that. That's super hard. These are just things they kind of ask almost, every other year, every 3 years on the AP test. Know, of course, the shifters of aggregate demand and aggregate supply, right? If there's an increase in government spending or there's an increase in taxes, like what would cause aggregate demand and supply to shift and change? Make sure you can calculate the spending multiplier. They've asked several questions over the years. Have they given you the marginal propensity to consume? And they say, okay, here's how much people spend, and this is the initial change in spending. How much total can it become? Now, I want to point out, if you're freaking out, you're like, I don't know any of this stuff. What are you talking about? I'm behind. Don't worry. I'm going to go over that. We got 2 hours to go over a lot of these concepts. And most importantly, you have my summary videos where I'm going to go over all those concepts as well. So you can watch those summary videos to go a little slower. Anyways, back to the list of 12 things you need to know. You got to show how the economy adjusts to long run, right? So if there's a recessionary gap or an inflationary gap, how does the economy get back to the long run? You got to be able to read a bank balance sheet. They've been doing that for the last couple of years as well. So know how to calculate the reserve requirement. And if someone deposits money or withdraws money from that bank, how does it affect assets and liabilities? Also calculate the money multiplier, explain open market operations. Man, if there's one thing you got to know, other than all these graphs, it's open market operations. I was just going over the 2006 test or 2016 test, and there was 4 questions on open market operations in the multiple choice. They ask it so often. Buy big, money supply gets bigger. Sell small, money supply gets smaller. It's the most important one that the AP tests ask about. Also, explain the idea of exchange rates on net export. So if a currency appreciates or depreciates, what does that do for trade in that country? And the last one is be able to categorize a certain transaction into either current account or the financial account. That's called the balance of payments. Now, again, if you're totally I'm lost, well, you probably should have studied a little more up to this point. But even if you didn't study and you're still lost and this is the time to do it. You're going to feel tired. And it's good. This is what it's going to feel like in college. So you're learning how to deal with the stress. You should be exhausted, man. And 2 weeks from now, you should be like, oh my gosh, that test was so hard. It was so hard to get ready. I pushed so hard. If at the 2 weeks you're like, whatever, I didn't really push myself, then that's not going to help you much for college, and it's not going to increase the chance you're going to pass. So what I'm saying is, work hard, man. I'll be here to help you along the way. Check out my videos, but you got to put that time and that effort in. All right, now you're properly motivated, so let's go over some practice, okay? Now, really quickly, I want to point out, I need you to stay on time with me so you can ask questions, right? So this is going to sound weird, but right here, these are the main relationships on the AP test. What I'm going to ask you to do is this. Don't pause this video. If you pause this video and start working this out, then it's going to be a problem because then you're going to be off in a different time than me, and the questions you ask, aren't going to be up to date when I start taking your questions in a few minutes. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at the list. It's over there. It's over there. Okay, that list right there. So this list has all the key relationships on the macro exam. Now what's interesting is the AP test is all about relationships. That's what it is. It's all about relationships. If you can keep track of how these different things affect each other, because it's all about cause and effect. This changes this. This changes this. These are the key relationships, man. If you can do these, this is like at least 30 of the 60 multiple choice questions right there. Yeah, that's it. So and some of them are related, right? So a change in interest rates affects investment, and investment affects this and affects that. So you got to know those relationships. Again, now is not the time to do it, because if you do, then you're going to be off on our timing. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you the right answers. I'm going to put the slide up that shows you the right answers so you can go check yourself. But I want you to remember, I'm going to go back after this whole video is over, after we practice, right? Go back and check this, because this is the most valuable thing you can do in macroeconomics are these relationships. So if that makes sense, here are the right answers in case you're wondering. The right answers are here, right? And what I mean by right answers, I mean if interest rates go up, then investment goes down. In fact, that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to leave the rest up to you to figure out and to learn. But interest rates is the most important concept when it comes to macroeconomics for this test, right? Because it's going to affect everything you learn in monetary policy. If you don't understand interest rates, the monetary policy doesn't make any sense. And it also has huge implications when we talk about trade between countries and appreciation and depreciation of currency. So interest rates is so important. The most important thing you got to remember is what is investment. Remember, investment is never, ever, ever stocks and bonds. It's never your parents' retirement account. It's never that. Investment is always business spending by companies, right? These are businesses buying machines, tools, factories, what the AP test calls capital stock, right? So investment is always that, because if you mess it up and you reverse it, if you say, oh, interest rates go up, so I'm more likely to invest. I want to buy more bonds at a high interest rate. Oh, dude, everything's going to be wrong. You get all the wrong answers and everything in reverse, and that messes you up. So the most important relationship is that first one right there, up there. Interest rates, when they go up, investment always goes down, 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 down. All right, so take a look at the other ones when you have a chance. I'm going to move on to some other stuff I want to show you guys. Right here, real quickly, since I'm talking about this, here is some what's called side vocab for the test. And again, I promise you, I'm going to go into a whole lot more details than I'm doing right now. But side vocab means concepts that are important that might trip you up on a multiple choice test, but they're not like a key vocab term you saw over and over and over and over again throughout the year. Like, for example, like monetary policy, you know what that is, right? Controlling the money supply. Fiscal policy, taxes and spending. Those are the big concepts. These are the little concepts that you might see that if you're not comfortable with this, it'll mess you up. So first one, capital stock is machines, tools, and factories. That's what promotes growth. Stagflation is the idea when aggregate supply shifts to the left, right? So their price level goes up, quantity goes down. That's the idea of stagflation. It's caused by a supply shock, right? Supply shock means we run out of a key resource. We don't have oil or electricity. We can't produce as much as we did before. Autonomous consumption. Again, keep in mind, I want to point out, these aren't like the most important concepts. What I'm saying is these are little concepts that might trip you up on a multiple choice question. So don't go study this list and be like, oh, I got this list, I'm done. This is not like the most important list. These are like the little things that you got to watch out for that just someone mentioning it to you might help. Autonomous consumption is the idea that people will spend a certain amount no matter what, right? They'll spend a certain amount on their food and their rent and stuff like that no matter what. Crowding out, oh my gosh, the crowding out. AP test loves crowding out. Crowding out's the idea that when the government deficit spends, it basically gets in line for money and wants more money, and so that means less money for investors and for consumers. So basically that means higher interest rates. So deficit spending increases interest rates, the real interest rate. Velocity money is a concept, right? That's how much money is spent and respent over time. It has to do with the quantity theory of money. Again, I'm going to go over it. Demand deposits and excess reserves. If you've seen bank balance sheets, you've seen those terms before. Federal funds rate, that's an important one. Federal funds rate is the idea of what banks charge each other for loans. And so make sure you remember that when we're talking about a bank, wanting to borrow, they can borrow from the Fed or they can borrow from another commercial bank. And so the federal funds rate is the rate that they charge each other. Leakages is the idea that if money doesn't stay in the country, if there's spending going on but the money leaves, or if leakage in the money supply might be if someone saves money, like puts it under their bed as opposed to putting it back into the bank. Fiat money and commodity money is another term you might see. There's two different types of money. Fiat money has no value, no intrinsic value. Foreign direct investment is the idea that firms are going to invest directly into another country entirely. So I'll go buy a ski resort in another country, or a mall or a factory in another country. And last one, infrastructure. That tripped my students up one year. Infrastructure is like bridges and stuff. Again, I want to point out, this review session is not going to look like this. I'm not going to put a bunch of vocab terms up and be like, well, I'm just going to talk vocab. I'm just making sure if I use these terms, you don't get tripped up. And if the AP test uses those terms, you don't get tripped up. Make sense? Okay, cool. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to switch back to full mode here. And we're going to talk. Oh, no, I'm nice and big. Hi, how are you? Good. All right, so it's time to start taking looks at your questions. Let you know what we're doing. First, I'm going to take some of your questions. and we're going to talk to each other a little bit. Then I'm going to hit to the board, and I'm going to draw the key graphs, maybe quiz you a little bit, make sure you can draw it yourself. And then what what's going to do is I'm going to give you a multiple choice question. So the last 20 minutes here, we'll do some multiple choice questions and see if you're actually getting it and go from there, okay? Good. I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. It's a beautiful Friday, and it's time for you guys to ask me a few questions. If you have questions general about the test to start off with, and we can get like more specifics, like the real detail, draw this graph or what is this exact concept. So I'm just going to start reading. Let's keep it clean, keeping it clean. First, there was a shout out. Oh, these are so many nice things you guys are saying. Who was that teacher? I should know his name. He's right here. Quiz. I'm just going to say the Quiz Man. Quiz Man. You know who I'm talking about. Someone mentioned giving a shout out to you. Gosh, there's way too many questions from you guys. I'm just going to start right here. Bad words. Somebody's getting a hard time on Obama. Some moron put some swastikas. Wow, that's my audience? Really? That's who's taking the AP test? That's not particularly good. Okay. Fiat cars. You guys are talking to each other. We should switch to Twitter. This is not really getting Mr. Clifford. If we look for a question on the exam or we just lost, what do we do? That's a legit question, dude. Legit question. Thank you, Angela, for that question. If you're lost, skip it. Totally skip it. If you miss 10 questions in the AP test, totally fine, man. I mean, totally fine. You can still easily get a 5 if you just miss 10. So, for example, if you come across a question of stuff that you haven't seen, or it's a really long question, sometimes for comparative advantage, if it's a real long, wordy one, you're like, it's going to take me like 5 minutes to do this. Keep in mind, you got a minute per question. That's what you got. 60 minutes for 60 questions. So make sure to spend the time wisely and be efficient with your time. So you might have to skip sometimes. What else we got? I see some people talking about GDP deflator. I promise I will get to that. I do want to point out that's an example of what I'm talking about. The GDP deflator and CPI are both fringe. I mean, they're big concepts, and like in real life, they're important, but they're both fringe things. There's going to be like one multiple choice that talks about the GDP deflator or one multiple choice about CPI. It's sure as heck not going to be its own free response. Which reminds me, free responses. Free responses is where you get your points. That's what you want to do the best. The AP tests, people who write the tests have put all those tests online. You can go online, get old AP tests, and then from there, you can just practice. The AP test asks the same sort of free response questions. If you just practice them and just make sure you got them, that's going to give you easy points. Why? Because remember, AP test, it's 90 points total, 30 from the free response, 60 from the multiple choice. If you can get like 25, on the free responses, you're almost there to halfway to pass the actual test, right? But now, if you're getting a 5, obviously you want to know GDP deflator, CPI, but you don't have to know every little tiny detail. I promise you I will jump on both of these. Somebody asked me for bank balance sheets. I will do that as well, I promise. Are you grading the test this year was a question. Yes, I am grading the test. This year they signed me to micro. Yeah, it's the worst 10 days ever because I'm doing the thing I hate more than anything else in the world, which is grading. But it is cool to see my friends. It's great to be with other econ teachers and hang out with them. So I am doing that. Someone asked what my free response predictions are. I promise you I'll post those. Those will be posted by the end of the review session today. I'm going to make you wait for those. Thank you so much, you rock. Hey, man, you rock. Thank you. Shifts. This thing's bouncing around. Can you go over aggregate demand and how it affects the Phillips curve? Yes. In fact, that's the first thing I'm going to do when I pop back up here. I think I have a few of your questions in here, enough to jump in here, see T-charts. You guys are asking all for the same stuff, which is good. Real wages. The good news is everything you guys are writing, I mean it, every single thing you guys are writing are all things that I've made videos on. Loanable funds, free responses. Good luck to all. I like you, Sam. Sam, you're a good man. Talk about monetary policy and investment. I will, for sure. Is Keynes classical economist thinking on the test? That's a good question. So I'm going to answer these questions that are kind of the quick ones I can pound out as opposed to like graphs. I can't draw a graph, like not yet at least. Keynes and classical economists is not on the test explicitly. They don't ask you who was Hayek or who was Friedman and who was Keynes. They will ask questions like, classical economists believe which of the following, and usually it's the idea that wages are flexible and the economy can self-correct rather quickly. The other questions here, hardest concept in macro. That's a good question too. It depends if you're mathy, right? I think some people have a hard time with the deflator. I think some people have a hard time with terms of trade. Depends on who you are. But none of them are hard. I'm being honest. None of the macro tests, if you've had a chance to take a practice one, none of them are like, what? I can't do this. This is super hard. I mean, I don't know, compared to calculus or physics, right? This is pretty easy stuff, right? Just know your relationships. What a tease, making you wait. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm making you wait, the menace. What do you believe the hardest? No, we already covered that. Can you explain the graph for short and long run average supply? I will. T-charts, please. You got it. How many free response are there? Good question. That's a great question, man. There are three. Yes, three free responses. There are one long one, and that first one usually pulls for multiple units. In other words, it'll start you off with aggregate demand supply almost 100% of the time, and then it'll say, okay, what happens with foreign exchange, or how about the loanable funds, or money supply and demand? So they start off with one unit and usually head to another unit. So it's kind of two parts to it on that first one. And then the second and the third free responses, usually they stick to one unit and they kind of stick with the concept. Now that reminds me about grading. If your teacher didn't already tell you this, a couple things. On the free response, draw something, anything. Like, don't leave anything blank ever because you can't get any points. You'd be surprised. Just put what you know on there, even if you're not sure. Also, the way that we grade these tests is if you mess up, if you thought aggregate demand was supposed to go up and it was actually supposed to go down, and you missed that point, we still can get you further points. So for example, if you go aggregate demand, does something and it's wrong, but in the next part of the question you say, well, because price level goes up, and so I think this is going to happen, you can still get that second point. So stick with whatever you do and follow the logic of the class, because that's all this class is, the big logic class. I will explain capital inflows and outflows if you'd like. I also did it in a video. I'm such a fan of this. Well, thank you, 3987 Mex. How often do aggregate demand outside the intermediate range? Oh, dude, William Robertson, I like that question. It's a great question. Very rarely. Very rarely. And by the way, his question is, it's about the aggregate supply curve and how there's three ranges, right? There's the Keynesian range, intermediate range, and the classical range. Just draw it upward sloping. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, just draw the short run, aggregate supply curve, upward sloping, unless the test throws a question at you, goes, okay, they're in the Keynesian range, or this is a really bad recessionary gap, or they give you some information to tell you that they're not there. There's been a couple of responses where they drew it for you, but for the most part, always draw an upward sloping aggregate supply. Good question, William. Thank you. Shout out to Lyndhurst High School, Edgar. All right, don't do any shout outs. I know that was the one I'm going to do. I'm not going to do anymore. All right. Is it possible to prepare for both tests in 5 days? Yes. Which reminds me, of course, I have to do a shameless plug for the Ultimate Review Packet. Not only does it help pay for me to make videos and to teach part-time, which I do, it allows you to pass those tests. The Ultimate Review Packet is awesome. I added in 4 AP tests to it as well. So if you haven't got it, go get it. If you, in fact, if you're in a classroom, you're watching with your teacher, everyone point to your teacher right now. Be like, hey, why don't we have that? Why don't we all get together and get the bulk discount and buy that thing right now? Do me a favor though, don't get one copy for yourself and give it to your friends. Hook me up by paying for this so I can continue to do what I'm doing, which is helping you guys out. Let's keep going. Shout out to oh gosh, horrible person. All right, I'm gonna switch over to something else here. So I will come back to your questions, I promise. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch over to the other camera, and that will help us get this thing up and running. So here we go. Yes, that's it. Feels good, man. Last year I was stuck right in front of my screen with bad resolution. This year I went out and bought a good microphone and a better camera so I can actually draw some graphs with you guys. So here we go. It's time to graph. Now, first thing I want to say, this needs to be interactive. When I ask you questions, I want you to talk back to me, right? I want you to talk back to me so you're paying attention. If I ask you to draw a graph, draw the graph, right? So right now, if you didn't already do so, take out a piece of paper, man. Let's draw these graphs. Remember, there's only 5 key graphs, so take out a piece of paper. I'll give you some time. Come on now. Okay. let's be honest. If you don't have a paper right now and you didn't bother taking one out, why are you watching? Like, I don't mean this to be rude, but whatever. Like, come on, like, do it. If we're here, we might as well do this thing. So you probably have the wrong attitude if we're like, I'm just gonna watch him do it. Have you do it, all right? So there are 5 key graphs. What I'm gonna do, if I can, I think I can fit them. If I'm over here, let us start off with the first of the key graphs. The first key graph, and hopefully that size works for you, is aggregate demand and aggregate supply. In fact, let me draw this a little bit bigger. I want you to please draw, right now, by yourself, aggregate demand and supply showing a recessionary gap. What? A recessionary gap. Label the current price level and quantity, right? And the long run aggregate supply as well. If you're confused, I'll say it again. I would just like you to draw aggregate demand and supply showing a recessionary gap. Recessionary gap, show me current price and quantity and the long run aggregate supply. Okay, hopefully you have it done. Now real quick, as other people are finishing off. I had a weird thought. I thought about the other day, I was realizing that there is a really good chance that the future Fed chair watches these videos, or maybe even watches this video. Like, it could be you, right? It's kind of a weird idea, right? So if you took econ in high school, and obviously you like econ, and you go to college, you like econ, and you start doing more econ, somebody's going to be the Fed chair, right? In 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, right? That's an interesting thought, right? Now, by the way, if you become a Fed chair, you give me a shout out the video. You give me the shout. When I was a kid, I learned these videos from this crazy guy with the ACDC belt buckle. I want that shout out. I'll be an 80-year-old man by that point, but it's cool. All right, aggregate demand and supply. First thing you have to know is this is price level. It is not, absolutely not the price, because it's not a market, and we're looking at multiple different products. We're looking at everything, right? Down here we have the GDP real. You can put output if you wanted to. We've always got a downward sloping aggregate demand, right? And the reason why, when price level is high, no one really wants to buy it. Price level is low, people want to buy more of your stuff, right? Not just a product, but all products. There's a short run aggregate supply. It's upward sloping. In the short run, firms have an incentive to produce more, right? Prices go up, I've got an incentive to produce more stuff. Now, you're always going to be where the short aggregate supply hits the aggregate demand, which is right here. Price level at equilibrium, and here is the quantity at equilibrium. So that's where we always are. The question is, where's the vertical line, right? There's going to be a vertical long-run aggregate supply curve. Now, I know you guys know where it is, but it's only got in 3 places. So this is where students can go, I don't get it. It's easy. It's either down the middle, to the side, or the other side. That's it. Now, since we wanted a recession, it's got to be over here. So it'll help you remember, recession to the right. Right? Long-run aggregate supply, this is the quantity at full employment. Remember, right? Quantity Y. The AP test might ask you to label it quantity FE or something else. Just, by the way, on the AP test, on the first response, always label what they tell you to label it as. All right, so right here, we are currently at that point. That is a key graph that you have to be able to draw. And there's 3 versions, like I said. There's recessionary gap, there's full employment, and there's an inflationary gap. Now there's another graph that I want you to draw. Right now, I want you to, next door to this graph, I want you to draw his best friend, Phillips. This is the Phillips curve. I want you to label the axes. I want you to please label the same idea of a recession. I'm going to put point A here, which shows the idea we're in a recession. And I want you to show me where is the recession on this graph. Please draw the short run and the long run Phillips curve. You know, I'm so stoked. You know what? All you guys must be doing graphs because all the comments stopped, which is awesome. That's awesome. You're awesome, right? That's point A. I'm going to switch. I'm going to bring a color in here. That's point A. Okay, you probably have it done. Think about all the people around the country, around the world right now, graphing the Phillips curve, aggregate demand, supply. So exciting. So exciting. By the way, did I show the belt buckle? Yeah, did you see that? That just happened. That just happened. All right, here we go. Up here, not price level. This is inflation. not labeled well, but that's inflation. This is unemployment. Now, like I said, it's important to label something. I mean, put as much as you can, even if you don't know. And it's important to know the key graph. There's only 5 of them. Downward sloping, short run Phillips curve. This is saying that we have an inflationary gap, there's high inflation, but there's very low unemployment. And when we have a recessionary gap, we have high unemployment, but relatively low inflation. Now, there's also a long run Phillips curve. Long run Phillips curve goes right there. Now, obviously, point A is right here. If this is a recession, point A is right here. No, absolutely not. You wouldn't do that. You know not to make that mistake. Point A can't be here. That doesn't make any sense. If there's a recession, point A must be here, right? So that's the idea of a recessionary gap. Point A on both graphs is right there. Recession, recession. Make sense? And the reason why is there's high unemployment, right? There's high unemployment and low inflation. That means we're not at full employment. Now, real quick, let's talk about what full employment is, right? You got to know this. What is full employment? When we talk about this current unemployment rate right there, what is it? How much is it? You might have heard the term the natural rate of unemployment. Natural rate of unemployment is the same kind of idea of why we end up in the long run. As you know, there are 3 types of unemployment: frictional, structural, and cyclical. Every economy, whether it's doing poorly or doing great, will always have 2 of them. They'll always have frictional and structural. There'll always be, right? There's frictional and structural. In the United States, frictional and structural adds up to about 5%. Now, the AP test won't usually ask you to label that 5%. You don't need to know the natural rate of unemployment in other countries, but understand the idea. So you see this, you go, oh, okay, that's the idea of full employment. This is full employment. That was weird. Full employment. Okay, why is this so important? It's important because, number one, you have to know the difference between the different unemployment rate, or the different types of unemployment. You have to be able, on the multiple choice, it is frictional, structural, cyclical, understand when people are those things, right? You should also know, for concept-wise, that full employment means 5%, not 0. Like, it would be weird if you think full employment is 0% unemployment, then there's a problem, because you don't quite realize this idea of an inflationary gap. Anyways, what we got right here is a situation where the economy is doing poorly. We got some options to fix it. Now, this class, if you look back at it as a whole, you start off with scarcity, production possibilities curve. What's an economy in the first place? Supply and demand in markets. Then you switch and start talking about GDP, the overall economy, inflation, unemployment, right? Then you switched over to the graphs. So you basically took GDP, unemployment, inflation, put them on graphs. Then the next stage, when this class kind of changed, is when you start talking about fiscal and monetary policy. You start saying, okay, how do you fix the economy? And there's 2 options. In fact, there's 3 options. There's 3 things we can do. I'm still in frame here, aren't I? Yes. So what can we do? Well, we can use fiscal policy. By we, I mean the government. We as in humans. Can you still see that? Not really. I'm going to move that over. Anyways, we can do fiscal policy. Do me a favor, write this down off to the side. Really? Yeah. I want you to do what I'm doing. Follow me. All right, I'll put it over here. Number 1, fiscal policy. That's one option. We can use that. Number 2, we can use monetary policy. Or number 3, we can do no policy. Right, some of you guys who were classic, Austrian autonomous, yeah, no policy, right? So, this is the government getting involved. This is the government saying, it'll fix itself. The question is, what happens on the graph? And more importantly, what are examples of these things, right? So that's what we have to be able to do. All right, take a deep breath. We're switching from graph, where the economy is, to how to fix it. This is where the class starts getting tricky, and there's a lot of details to keep track of all these different things. But the good news, if you just compartmentalize, you'll be fine. Fiscal policy is a joke, man. It's easy. There's only 2 things. There's only 2 things the federal government can do, or any government can do. They can change government spending. I'm going to write gov. I'll just write government spending, G, or taxes. All right? They can change those things. Now, in this case, if there's a recession, well, they can either increase government spending right? Which will increase aggregate demand. Can you see that? Oh yeah. Or what can they do to taxes? Did you talk back? You said so. Okay, good. Taxes, they can lower them. If they lower income taxes, that means people have more disposable income. They can go spend more money because they're not giving their money to the government. And so aggregate demand is going to increase. In both cases, aggregate demand is shifting to the right and solving the problem. We are now closing the recessionary gap. That's fiscal policy. All right, monetary policy. Controlling the money supply. So I'm going to write MS, money supply, supply of money. All right? So we got to increase it or decrease it, and that'll lead to a chain of events. It's called monetary policy. It's done by the Fed, right? The Fed gets together and says, oh, we got a recession, the economy's not doing well. What are we going to do? Well, some change here is going to lead to a change, it's an arrow, to interest rates, which is going to change investment and consumption and change aggregate demand. So what I'm doing, cool. What I'm doing here is I'm showing you this chain of events that comes with relationships. Relationships. So what could the Fed do to close this recessionary gap? Well, they could increase the money supply. Now, in your brain, you should be able to see the money market graph with that. But increasing the money supply means there's more money out there, right? There's more money out there. Banks have more money. They all have more money, so it's easy to loan it out. That means interest rates are going to go down. Lower interest rates, as we said before, is going to increase investment and consumer spending, right? People take out more car loans, and businesses will take out more loans to buy more machines, tools, and factories. And so aggregate demand is going to go up. Bam! Right? There it is. That's the idea of monetary policy. Now, if we do no policy, right? We just wait it out. We can do that. That's an option. Well, no policy is going to have effect on wages, which is going to affect costs, which is going to affect aggregate supply. Ooh, this is different. This is different. You might have seen the video I made on this. But I know it's a little hard to see on that one. I'll talk as you're looking at, or I'll just turn this light off real quick. Can you see that better? A little bit better. It's okay. You'll muscle it. It'll be fine. All right. So there's no policy, right? There's no policy, and the government goes, let's just wait this thing out, right? In theory, if wages are flexible, right? If wages are flexible, eventually they'll fall. Why? Well, because if there's a real bad recession and there's, high unemployment, which we said we're having, right? We're having something like 10, 15% unemployment. So we're not producing very much. We have high unemployment. That means eventually workers be like, I'll accept a lower wage. And if all workers or a lot of workers do that, that means costs will go down for firms. And lower costs means aggregate supply would increase. Now, you might notice this huge concept, aggregate demand, aggregate demand, aggregate demand, aggregate supply. So all of these things are trying to close a recessionary gap, but they're doing it in two different ways, right? The policies by the government and by the Fed are trying to shift aggregate demand, which will result in inflation and maybe crowding out and some other concepts we'll talk about later. That could shift aggregate demand that way. And no policy just waits for aggregate supply to shift right back over. Now, obviously, in real life, we use these more often because it's hard to get reelected by just saying, don't worry, no policy. But you might see on the actual AP test. Make sense? I hope it does, because it's time to draw it right now. By yourself, what I want you to do is please show the result of the first one. Let's say government does increase in government spending. So on both graphs, show what's going to happen and give me a point B on the Phillips curve that shows me where we ended up. All right? Draw that shift. I heard somebody, or I read someone, I'm going to keep talking as you keep working. Someone asked what I stands for. It's a good time to bring up, there are some letters that we reserve, so be careful. If you're not being taught, your teacher's not teaching you certain letters, or don't just use random letters, right? But the key one, CIGXN, and write IR for interest rates. On the AP test, it's probably a good idea to write these out. An increase in money supply would lower the interest rate, which would increase investment, right? But again, that's okay. You didn't have to write it like this. So thank you for the person who said that. You're awesome. Bonus points to you. Person who asked. It's not back up here anymore. Oh my gosh. There's some people who say some mean things. Don't bother reading this. There's some mean people. Why do they watch videos on econ? Anyways, I do see Kendall saying I is investment. Thank you for helping other people. That's awesome. Free speech. I agree. Hey, I agree. Free speech. That's one thing I agree with you on that one. That guy who keeps posting bad things. I do agree to free speech. I think that's good. But I also agree with efficiency and being productive. And that's not particularly productive. Hey, thanks, Jennifer Powell, AP teacher. You rock. I'm glad that you like it. Shout out. I will give a shout out to. No, I can't. Is that I said La Jolla? I said La Jolla. AP Econ teacher here. I love your videos. Nicole. I'm getting all these shout outs from AP teachers. And they're all ladies. Is there a bunch of ladies? Ladies. All right, let's get to the graph. Aggregate demand. What's going to happen? Well, we already know aggregate demand is going to go up. I'm going to switch over to green. Aggregate demand is going to shift to the right. We're assuming that they actually close the entire gap. Here's the aggregate demand. This is a new point, point B. What happens on both graphs? Well, this curve is going to shift. No, it's not. Remember, a shift in aggregate demand moves along the Phillips curve, the short-run Phillips curve. So whenever aggregate demand changes, that moves along. It actually creates the Phillips curve. And whenever there's a shift in aggregate supply, that'll actually shift the short-run Phillips curve. So the point B is right here. The economy is now at full employment. Right? We got full employment right here. We're producing the total amount that is at full employment. Right here, we're now at the unemployment rate, which represents the idea of full employment. Now, this is exactly what you'll see on a free response. Free response asks these questions all the time. In fact, the AP test is really predictable. Almost every single year, for 12 years straight, they ask either of these two graphs. They'll start it off by saying, okay, draw aggregate demand and supply with a recession, or inflationary gap, or full employment. And then this event occurs. There's an increased government spending. There's a decrease in government spending. There's an increase in the value of the currency. There's a decrease. Interest rates go up. And they ask you some sort of change, so you shift aggregate demand or whatever it's supposed to happen. And then a lot of times they'll switch over to, okay, now what policy will fix it? Or what if the government does this? What if the Fed does that? Right? So this is it. Like, this is what the test looks like. I'm not, trying to trick you. And the AP test is not trying to trick you. It's actually kind of easy if you get used to practicing it. Now, that being said, I want to point out really quickly, we use fiscal policy to close the gap. Fiscal policy is really easy. What's a little trickier is that darn monetary policy. Monetary policy, I hope you guys can still see this. There are 3 ways to increase that money supply. Right? And I know this is starting to get ugly, and I'll have to race in a second anyways. But this right here says the supply of money, or the money supply. There are only 3 ways to get that money supply to increase, and that's what the Fed does, right? To get, oh, you totally can't see that. I guess you can. 3 things that shift the supply of money. Do you know what they are? They're huge on the test, particularly in the multiple choice. They are, number 1, RR. What's RR? What's RR? Reserve requirement. This is the reserve requirement. The Fed can control how much banks have to hold in reserves. So they can increase it or decrease it. In this case, if they lower the reserve requirement, that means banks can loan out more, they create more money, that increases the money supply. They can also adjust the discount rate. Right? The discount rate is the rate that the Fed charges banks. So if they lower that discount rate, banks are able to go to the Fed and borrow more money. That increases the money supply and causes these events to occur. And the most important one, the one you need to know, is open market operations. This is the idea of the Fed buying and selling government bonds, also called securities, if you've heard that. So, by the way, it's the most important because it's the one the Fed actually does. And it's super important because this is the one they test over and over again. In this case, they would buy bonds. And the Fed would buy bonds. The Fed buys bonds, that puts money into the system, it increases the money supply. Now make sure we understand why that is, okay? Bonds aren't money, right? If you think about when I talk about money, money is anything that can be used as a medium of exchange. So I can write a check, right? The money in my checking account is considered money. This is idea, money in my checking account, obviously cash is money. And that's the idea of M1 money, right? Bonds are not. Bonds aren't money, and stocks aren't money, and real estate and your car isn't money. Those things have value, but they're not, there's assets, but not money. If a bank has a bond, it's been issued, right? So there's another bank, Bank of America, or Wells Fargo, whatever, they have a bond, and the Fed comes to them and says, listen, we're going to buy that bond back. What do? Well, they take the bond, which is not money, They put money into the bank. That new money that's put in the bank increases the money supply. Buy bonds. Boom! That's it. Now, by the way, my students always ask, am I like, this, weird in real life and exciting? This excites me. I'm excited about learning this stuff. I like this stuff. Hopefully you do too. That is the key graph. Now, I want to point out, the AP test can have you do this aggregate supply shift we saw earlier with no policy. That could be a thing. They could ask you about growth in the long run, right? What happens in the long run? That's something that could be that happen as well. It's important to keep in mind, when you see interest rates going down, they usually mean the short run. They're not meaning to keep going. Because you could say, stay with me, that this increase in investment led to more machines and tools and factories, right? And so now there's more capital that factories have, and that would cause aggregate supply to go up, and that would cause the long run aggregate supply to go up. And so really, you could get yourselves all confused. Just read the question. And the AP tests know, the people who write the test are actually really smart people. They know how to write a question, so there's no ambiguity of, I'm not sure what they're trying to say here. Just read the question. It'll tell you exactly where to stop and where to get to. Does it make sense? Hope it does. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to switch gears. We are switching now to the next graph. If you remember, it was aggregate demand supply, Phillips curve, money market. Right now, I want you to please draw the money market showing the nominal interest rate and quantity of money. Future Fed chair, graphing right now. Okay, if you're sitting there, you're doing it wrong. Remember, you're drawing the money market, supply and demand for money, showing, make sure you dot down, dot over, that sort of thing, showing the nominal interest rate. We're not going to draw any shift yet. Here we go, money market. On the AP test for response, you see a question that says, okay, draw the supply and demand for money, show the result of the Fed buying bonds, or show what happens when the demand for money goes up, or show the results of blah, blah, blah. So they tell you what graph to draw. There's really no draw the graph that shows kind of what interests do. It's not, like I said, it's not at all ambiguous or hidden. It's like, draw this graph. We told you to draw this graph. You can draw this graph. Do it. Just drawing the graph will get you, 1 out of the 2 points. So just make sure you've memorized the key graphs. Up here, we've got the nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate. Down here, we have the quantity of money. Okay, we got to go back and make sure we understand the definition of money, right? When we talk about money, we're talking about M1 money in the money supply. We're talking about money that's obviously cash in people's pockets, but also, and maybe even more importantly, money that's deposited in banks, demand deposits, right, in people's checking accounts, because that can be used to buy stuff. So we're talking about the amount of money that's available. There are 2 reasons why you have money, right? If you have money in your pocket right now, there's 2 reasons why you do. Number 1 is because you want to buy stuff. It's called the transaction demand for money. You want to buy things, you need money to go get gas and to buy a burrito and to get things, so you need money. The other reason why you want money is because it's an asset. It's called the asset demand for money. I prefer holding money than other assets, right? I could put that money and buy stocks. I can go buy bonds, but it's better just to sometimes have money because it's a liquid asset. It's really easy to have. I'm not going to lose it all of a sudden. A business is not going to go out of business. A bank's not going to go under. So why is that important? Well, that tells you the shape of the demand. Take a look. The demand for money, all right, DM, you can say MD. There might be different labeling depending on the test. When the interest rate's really high, let's make up a number, 30%, then you have an incentive not to have money. I don't want to have a lot of money. I'd rather go buy those bonds. So at a super high interest rate, the money you have in cash is being wasted, right? There's a high opportunity cost. However, when it's only like 0.001% interest, you might as well have all your money in cash because you're not giving up the money you could have earned by actually buying a bond. So the demand for money is downward sloping. Remember, for two reasons. Asset demand explains this, and there's also transaction demand. Now, that's demand. What does the supply look like? Well, it's a vertical. Yes, the supply of money is unrelated to interest rates, and it's set right here, setting the interest rate. I'll write RR, quantity of money. That is the money market graph. That's what the AP test will ask you to draw. Can you do it? I hope you did. That is the money supply graph that you have to be able to draw. This explains monetary policy, right? For example, if, and I'll write it down here, if the Fed buys bonds, so the Fed buys bonds, show what's going to happen on this graph to the interest rate. So shift whatever shifts, right? On here, if the Fed buys bonds. By the way, if you're like a student trying to get a 5, you're like, man, this is really easy. Cool, that's good. Right? We're reviewing the stuff that you totally feel comfortable with. Right? We'll start with that. We'll get to the harder stuff later. On this graph, show the shift if the Fed buys bonds. Okay, what's going to shift? Well, it's not the demand. The demand is based on individuals, you and me, right? The demand for money, right? Inflation would shift demand, right? So higher inflation, I'd need more money because I need more money for transactions. So that could shift the demand. This is going to be a supply shifter. This is one of those shifters we just mentioned a few minutes ago, and it would be increase. Remember, buy big. Money supply gets bigger. Supply of money would increase, shifting to the right. And since there's more money out there, banks have more money out, so the price of money is going to fall. Right? So interest rate, the nominal interest rate is going to go down, and there's going to be more money out there. Right? Bam! That's the graph. That's the idea of monetary policy. Now, is it contractionary or expansionary monetary policy? Well, it's expansionary, right? This is going to expand the economy. This is going to lead to a chain of events that we literally just saw a few minutes ago right here. If you increase the money supply, that's going to drive down interest rates. Lower interest rates makes it easier to take out loans for factories and machines for businesses. That means we're going to have more investment. More investment means an increase in aggregate demand. This is monetary policy to get the economy up and running again. The reason why is to fight the recession and to fight unemployment. Does it make sense? Great. So the most important thing I want you to understand is that interest rates have gone down. Lower interest rates. How do you guys feel about that? Great. Now, if that makes sense, interest rates go down. Let's go ahead and write that over here. Interest rates have fallen. That's what we came up with. Like I mentioned before, the AP test on that first free response likes to ask a couple questions, right? They ask from different units. Right now we got another graph, right? We're not going to do loan funds this time. Let's do another one. Let's do foreign exchange. Let's talk about the value of the dollar, right? The value of the dollar. So we're analyzing the US dollar in here. And the question on the AP test would be, draw the supply and demand for the dollar and the current exchange rate, right? So draw the supply and demand for the dollar and show the current exchange rate that is happening in the foreign exchange. Some people ask if this is going to be recorded. Yes, this will be posted up on YouTube. In case you're interested, you can come back to it later on. I'm going to keep it, once I post it, it's going to go into the files that you can have access if you have the Ultimate Review Packet. So obviously, awesome, it's great you're here live, so watch it live. But I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it into the videos, the hidden videos with the Ultimate Review Packet. So, again, by the way, I hope you don't think I'm being greedy with that thing. People always go, why do I have to pay for it? The truth is, I teach part-time. I teach part-time so I can be here doing this kind of stuff and making other videos. So that helps me, pay the bills. Also, I have 5 kids. Dang kids. It's expensive. That was a joke. Dollar. We're looking at the international value of the dollar. Okay, in this case, we didn't compare it to any other currency. So sometimes you might hear yen over dollars or something like that. For this one, I'm just going to write the exchange rate, which is the international value of a dollar. Down here is the quantity of dollars. That's the same darn thing, right? You got a downward sloping demand curve. Okay, that makes sense. Demand is downward sloping, right? When the currency is a very high value, then people don't really want to get it, right? Other countries don't want to go get it. And it's low value, more countries do want to get your currency. And the supply is upward sloping. Okay. Here's a trick. Here's a trick to making sure you get the answers in this every single time. Just remember who's demanding and supplying. Now, I know some of you are obviously in other countries right now. Let's just assume you're in the United States, right? So we're looking at Americans here. Do Americans demand dollars or supply dollars? Did you answer that out loud again? Do Americans supply or demand dollars? Well, in most cases, almost always, they supply them. People always go, oh, the Americans demand. No, like when you go to a foreign exchange, right, you're in line to convert your currency to another country's currency. You're not going, oh, I need the dollars. You're not demanding, you're supplying. You're putting dollars in so you can get other countries' currency. The only time that you're actually demanding your dollars is when you went somewhere and you're coming back and you want your dollars back, right? So it's important to keep in mind who's demanding and supplying. The demand by any currency is by the foreigners, the people from the other country. The supply is, in this case, by Americans, the domestic country. Right? So if you just keep that in mind, when you see a question, this event occurs, is that affecting demand or supply? Is it affecting the people from other countries who demand it, or affecting the people who are in that country who supply it? Make sense? Anyways, we've got to finish off the graph. We've got, bam, we've got this, bam, this is the exchange rate at equilibrium. I'll write exchange rate, little e, and this is the quantity of dollars available. I'll try to Q, there it is. All right? Now, you might see, quantity of dollars with a dollar sign. It depends on what they ask you on the test. But we're not done. Here is where things get tricky. Deep breath. In, out. Now, we're going to put this concept in here. The effect of this. Remember cause and effect? What happens if this occurs to this? All right, now, before we do that, I want you to keep in mind there are 4 shifters of the foreign exchange. I'm going to review the foreign exchange graph first before I show you what happens with this event. The first shifter is tastes and preferences. Right? People prefer American, couches, I don't know, American whatever. That means they're more likely to need dollars. So tastes and preferences, or if they don't want American stuff, then they don't want American dollars. So tastes and preferences is like the easiest one. It's super easy to keep in mind. If Americans want other country stuff, so if Americans want to go, travel to Paris, that means they're going to supply more of their dollars to go buy those euros, right? So tastes and preferences is easy if you keep in mind who's supplying and who's demanding. So if people want more American stuff, demand's going to go up. If Americans want more other country stuff, that means supply would go up. And the other way, if people don't want American stuff, then demand would go down. And if Americans don't want other country stuff, then they would be supplying less of their dollars in the foreign exchange. Taste and preferences is the easiest one. Another one is income. Right? The richer you are, the more you're going to buy from other countries' stuff. So if I have more money, then I buy other countries' stuff. So United States, if GDP goes up, I can buy more stuff. I'm going to buy more stuff from Japan. And so I'm going to supply more dollars, right? And that would be a shifter, a potential shifter of foreign exchange. These two get a little trickier. Inflation would be a shifter. So if price level goes up, obviously if price level goes up in the United States, people don't want to buy American stuff because it's more expensive, right? Right? I mean, that's just logic, right? And if there's inflation in another country, really high inflation, they want to buy more American stuff because American stuff's relatively cheaper. Also really logical. So inflation might be a shifter. The last one is the reason why I want you to take a deep breath, because it's interest rates. Okay, the vast majority of the time, on multiple choice, you'll see one of these other shifters. They'll say, okay, what happens to the foreign exchange, or the exchange rate if these change? But they get to this. They get to this idea of interest rates. It's the hardest one. So let's cover it real quick. We know interest rates did something. So let's say interest rates fall. All right? So interest rates in this case are lower in the U.S. Lower in U.S. than other countries. What is going to happen? Is it supply or demand? Man, if interest rates are really low in the United States, is that going to increase demand, decrease demand, increase supply, or decrease supply of the dollar? Whew. Tough one. since you guys are figuring that out, I'll tell you something. Somebody asked, if you just label this IR as opposed to nominal interest rate, I don't think they would take off a point. They could change their policies though. If you just read the question though, they'll tell you, show the money supply, label the nominal interest rate and the quantity of money. Do you know what I'm saying? At equilibrium. So if you just follow the, what they're asking, you should be fine. And just get used to remembering nominal is money in market and real is loanable funds, which we'll get to in a second, but you'll be fine. Did that answer your question? Did that help you out? Mr. Diller 17? Dylan, I'm sorry. Dylan 17. Will the video be saved on the channel? I need to leave later tonight. Yes. Stealth will. It will be saved if you have the ultimate review packet for sure, 100%. Yeah. I know you guys are probably used to it because you guys do a lot of things on the internet. And I'm on the internet all the time, but I never get trolled like this guy. This guy is like, I've never seen that before. I've never personally experienced it. I hear about it all the time, but this guy, it would be nice if we had the power, if enough people say, you know what, this person's a jerk, we just turn off someone's internet. Do you know what I'm saying? What a great app that would be if over, 2,000 people, I'll go, okay, this person sucks. Beep, and their internet just turns off. That'd be awesome. Work on that. That's a good business idea. And I don't mean to pick on you, because you'll probably do it more. But yeah, you're probably not a good human being. Okay, somebody asked a good question. They said, do you have to title the graphs? Yes and no. The answer is yes if they ask for two graphs. So if they say draw the money market graph and the value of the dollar, then totally draw them both and label them, because how am I supposed to know which one you think is which? But in most cases, the way they ask the question, you might say, okay, B is this, and then part C is this, and that's good enough. So you don't have to actually put a title on the graph, but it's a good thing to do just to remember what we're actually analyzing and not analyzing. Okay. Oh, thank you, Zach. I'm glad you guys are actually listening and paying attention and doing it. Mr. Clifford, I think you can moderate the chat to a certain extent. I can? I can kick people off? That'd be awesome. Is that how it works? Can we take a break? Yeah, you can pause it. Okay. I'm going to do a shout out to Mr. Bill Wilson, econ teacher. Hope that was for you, Mr. Bill Wilson. Do we know each other? Have I met you? Okay, let's answer the question. That was that was your break. The person that left that comment. That was a break. All right. So if interest rates are lower, right? What's going to happen here? Now, get ready for this. Both of these things are double shifters. Two things. In fact, I'll put little stars next to them. Both demand and supply will shift whenever there's a change in inflation or a change in interest rates. Now, it's important. Don't just assume, right? If the AP test interest rates go down, that'll lead to inflation. They'll tell you. They'll say, assume interest rates in the United States have fallen. So interest rates are really low in the United States. What does that do? Demand or supply? In this case, it's going to be both, because we got to look at both other countries and Americans. Okay, here we go. This is the part where you go, All right, I mentioned earlier, right? When interest rates go down, investment always goes up, right? Lower interest rate means you're more likely to invest. You're taking out loans for machines, tools, and factories. So more investment is a good thing. That's great. Now, that's awesome. But that's not what's going on here. In this one case, and it's the only case that I can think of, a high interest rate, or in this case, a low interest rate, is a bad thing. Over here, a low interest rate was a good thing. Low interest rate means I can take out a loan and buy more machines, tools. But in this case, something else is happening. What we're talking about is inflow and outflow. It's called capital inflow, the amount of money that's coming in and out of countries. You know what I'm saying? So if interest rates fall, if interest rates are now lower in the United States, so now let's give you some numbers. let's say a bond was 5% and now it falls down to 1%. Do you want American bonds? I mean, do you want to buy American bond if now it's only 1%? I don't. I'd rather go buy another country's that's 5% or 10% or whatever. I'd rather get more money, right, and get a higher rate of return. Like I said, it's only one time when we're looking at inflows when lower interest rates are a bad thing, right? So what does that mean? It means that, I messed up right there. Only time when lower interest rates are a good thing. Did you guys get that? I'll say it again. Low interest rates, bad thing when trying to take out a loan. Low interest rate is a great thing when you're trying to get, I got confused. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I got confused because I got confused between the two. Let's do this again. Low interest rate is a great thing. Great thing, great thing, great thing. I was thinking high interest rate for some reason. Low interest rate, so don't pay attention to the last thing I just said. Interest rates are lower. That means it's easier taking a loan. That's a good thing. Great. Interest rates are lower. That's a bad thing. That means inflow is going to fall. Other countries are not going to want to buy American bonds because they obviously don't get a very high rate of return. So what does that mean? It means demand would fall. Demand would decrease for the dollar because people don't want to go buy American bonds, right? At the same time, supply would increase. Why? Well, because, let me draw some arrows in here. The reason why is because Americans, well, what are they going to do? Well, if there's a really low interest rate in the United States, well, I'm going to go put my money in another country and go get a higher rate of return. So it all depends on who we look at. Americans are going to supply more of the dollars because they're going to go want to get a higher interest rate somewhere else. Other foreigners are going to demand less dollars because they don't want to go buy American bonds because the interest rate's so darn low. The point is, and this is what I'm trying to get at this whole time, is the exchange rate is going to fall. The exchange rate is going to fall. The value of the American dollar relative to other countries is going to fall. This is the fourth graph. We've covered four. Aggregate demand, supply, the Phillips curve, money market. Now we're talking about foreign exchange. There's only one more graph we have to do, right? One more graph we have to do. So let's draw it, and then we're going to hit back to the table and let it answer some of your questions. It is the loanable funds market. It's time to draw a loanable funds market. Please draw, just like the AP test would tell you, loanable funds and show the equilibrium real interest rate. Graphing. Now I'm going to ask you guys a question for the people who are done. If you're in a classroom of like 30 people, send me a comment. Let me know. Right? Be like, okay, we after school we all got together. We decided to kind of review together. So are these views on my thing here individuals or any of them groups? Thirty's big. All right, maybe 10. Not 2. 2's pretty small. Arthur asked a good question. I might as well ask real quick. Answer. Can the Fed manipulate the federal funds rate? Yes. That's how they manipulate. They buy and sell bonds to manipulate the fund. In fact, that's the target rate they aim at. Right? So banks don't usually go to the Fed to borrow, right? To the discount rate. They don't usually do that. What they usually do is they borrow from each other, and the Fed watches that rate. So yes, they manipulate it, but they can't just tell banks what to charge. So clarify, the banks can't, the Fed can't say, okay, you charge this amount to other banks. But they can control the money supply and watch it till it falls where they want it to fall to, or go up to. Oh, Gary! Kevin, he's your teacher? Man, Mr. Gary Petmicki is awesome out of Georgia. I know him. We go way back. All right, I'll shout out North Penn, Mansfield High School. Mr. Morgan recommended you guys. Self-studying. Good luck. That sounded mean, but I'm not trying to be mean. Group of 10. All right. I'd appreciate a shout out to Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, shout out to you. Here from Mr. Lamb's class. Yeah, all right. I was working with some students a couple weeks ago out of Texas. I'm assuming that's the Mr. Lamb you're referring to. He's an awesome friend of mine. Yeah. There's one of my students. Let's talk about Alex Egan, huh? Why do you guys have time? Shout out to you, Mr. Clifford. Thank you so much. That's what we need. A shout out to me, right? For what I am doing. Just joking. I appreciate, first of all, I thank you guys so much for watching my videos. I mean it a lot. It's awesome. And, you know, the fact that people buy the Ultimate Review Packet is awesome. And you guys support my channel by watching the videos. In fact, really quickly, since we're taking a little break, we're getting to the loanable funds graph. I'm making a whole brand new set of videos. They're all designed to, you know, they're going to be more kind of interactive and more practical application econ stuff. In fact, I just posted one the other day. The idea of, what did I do? It was awesome. Oh, video games. That video games one I did. If you haven't seen it, take a look at it. It's pretty good. Not now, obviously. Study now. But, all right, let's do this. Loanable funds. Here we go. Starts like this. Congratulations. If you can do that, you're halfway there. The good news is, I want you to remember, it looks just like foreign exchange. It's a downward sloping demand, upward sloping supply, but here's important. This is the real interest rate. Real interest rate. And this down here is the quantity of loans. This is how many loans are available to be loaned out in the economy. It's different than the money market, similar, but this is the idea of how many loans are available and what the shifters are different. And obviously the supply is different. This supply is not set or just vertical. So this supply and demand interact differently with each other. Right here is the exchange rate. This is the interest rate, real. And here's the quantity of loans available for being loaned out by banks. All right, now, if that makes sense, here comes your question. Earlier, we had a recessionary gap, and in that recessionary gap, we said the government is increasing spending. This is called fiscal policy. So the government increased spending. Now, the kind of spending they're going to do in this case, let's say, right, that the way they do their spending, and let's put this as like, you know, question D on the test. Increase in government spending is deficit spending, right? So the government's going to deficit. Government's going to borrow. That's going to adjust demand and the supply of loanable funds. So right now, draw the shift that occurs when there's an increase in government spending. Deficit spending. Government's borrowing. All right, here we go. Yeah, you got it, Rachel Rose. She said crowding out. Dude, that's exactly what this is. This is crowding out. So what does that mean? Well, there's two ways to look at it. It depends if you have a Man-Q textbook or any other textbook. For our purposes, let's just focus on what happens to demand. When the government deficit spends, what's going to happen is they're going to borrow money. Now, the demand for loans is made up by individuals and businesses and the government, people who want to borrow money. So I want to borrow money for my car, or I want to borrow money to buy a house, or the government wants to borrow money to to build a train. So to do that, right? To do that, demand in this case, and by the way, supply is by individuals too. Like we supply our money and make it available for banks to loan out, right? So demand would go up. An increase in demand will lead to the real interest rate going up. And the quantity would also increase. But that's not as important. increase in deficit spending, particularly deficit spending, would increase the real interest rate. This concept, and you got to know it for the AP test, is crowding out. Now, I don't like teaching my students tricks, but to be honest, the vast majority of the time, this is the question they ask when they talk about loanable funds. They say, draw loanable funds, that's worth 1 point, and what happens when the government borrows? So in most cases, this is the shift that occurs, but don't just draw that. Look at the question. It makes total sense. For example, let's say instead, we were back at equilibrium, so right here, and let's say instead there is a decrease in confidence by foreign investors. I don't use that term too loosely, but there's a decrease of inflow. People don't want to put money into this country because they're afraid of like a war or a coup or something like that. That would decrease the supply of loanable funds. Right? There'd be less money out there to be loaned out. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, obviously that might also decrease demand. If you think there's going to be a war, you're not going to take out a demand, a loan for a car if you think there might be a war. But the cool thing is this for the macro test, and this applies to almost everything. The AP test is really good about handing you what they're looking for. They'll say, what'll be the effect on supply if there's a decrease in the amount of foreign direct investment or a decrease of capital inflows into a country. You know what I'm saying? They'd be very, very, very clear what they're looking for, and they'll tell you what happens to supply, right? So just read the question, you're going to be fine. This is the idea. And the last of the 5 key graphs, the loanable funds. Loanable funds. How'd you do? Did you get it? I hope so. All right, we're going to transition out of here real quick. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to erase this. I'm going to head back to the seat, and I'm going to let you guys ask questions. Do me a favor. Don't ask any question. Like some people just go, do the deflator. Like I can't do the deflator right now. Ask me other questions if you could, and then I'll get to the deflator and the bank balance sheets if we can as well. Okay? So, we're officially erased and ready to rock back in the saddle again. Woo! All right. So, hopefully that made sense. So, I'll give you a recap of what we've done. We've drawn the 5 key graphs. We understand how they might interact with each other. That's it. That's what the AP test asks. Every once in a while they'll ask maybe what happens in the long run with aggregate demand supply and shifting all 3 curves. They can ask what happens to the Phillips curve. I don't know. It depends this year what they're going to ask. I'll give you my my big reveal of what I think it's going to be in a few moments here. Someone really quick asked about the Macroeconomics review. That's going to be tomorrow night, which is Saturday, same time, 4 o'clock. So take a look at that if you're planning on taking the macro test. All right, let's see some of these questions here, huh? What are the shifters of supply again? Which kind of supply? So we're talking about market supply, shifter supply, price of the resources to produce stuff, technology, taxes, subsidies, the number of producers. These things would affect how many things can be produced. Demand and supply is actually really easy. Just remember, if it affects producers, it's supply. If it affects consumers, then it must be demand. All right. Which is harder, micro or macro? A great question coming out from Dara? It depends. I think it's easier to get a 3 in macro. Harder to get a 3 in micro. Yeah, because there's so many darn free response graphs. In the micro test, there's a lot of free responses. There's a lot of graphs, and so you gotta keep track of all the different graphs. They might throw a negative externality at you or something like that. So you just gotta be careful in micro. Macro is pretty standard. In fact, I'm gonna show you the multiple choice questions that they often ask in a second. We'll do a whole breakdown. Any other questions coming in? What is T account? Someone's asking what T accounts are. That's important. A T account shows you assets and liabilities and how the amount of money that a bank is holding in reserve, and you can calculate the reserve requirement. It's definitely something like you see. Take a look at my Unit 4 summary video. All that stuff is totally in there. All right. Let's see. Can you explain terms of trade? I can. Label axes, expenditure approach, income approach. You do need to know expenditure approach and the income approach, the idea of them. but they're really the same thing. So if I spend $20 on your product and you earn $20 of a wage, or $20 profit, that means that's the same $20 in the economy. They don't ask too many questions in the AP test about it, but students should understand what counts and doesn't count in GDP. If someone earned income, that counts towards GDP, assuming it was for a good or service made that year and something was actually created. What is a recessionary gap? Recessionary gap when there's high unemployment. It's not necessarily a recession, though. A recession is when there's 2 consecutive quarters of GDP falling, and then it turns out that when the economy is doing bad, but not necessarily in a recession, that's a recessionary gap. Nominal versus real. Super important concept. You see it with interest rates and wages and GDP. Nominal is not adjusted for inflation, and real is adjusted for inflation. A great example of that concept would be the idea of, you guys, someday you're going to, get a job, a full-time career. And, if there's 3% inflation, to go to your boss and say, listen, your boss goes, I'm going to give you a 2% raise. You're like, no, I got a, yes, I got a nominal increase in my wage. My nominal wage went up 2%, but adjusted for inflation, I'm still losing $1 or losing 1%. So my real wage has actually fallen, adjusted for inflation, right? So the point is, nominal and real is a super important concept. You see it with interest rates. For example, if, here's a good one. Here's a good thing to think about. So concept-wise, remember, we're doing broad concepts here. If the inflation rate is 5%, right, banks have to charge interest. And people go, banks are lame, they charge interest. Yeah, but if the inflation rate's 5%, I've got to charge at least 5%. If I don't, then the money I'm getting paid back is worth less money. So I got to charge at least 5%, maybe even 7%. But unexpected inflation raises that number higher, and you can add it with a negative real interest rate adjusting for inflation, right? So again, you're going to see this idea of nominal and real a lot. Someone asked if I am rich. I am rich in love and happiness, for sure. Oh, relationships. Someone asked, loanable funds supply shifter. People's willingness to save, right? Savings. If people don't save, that doesn't mean, and people spend a whole lot, that means we can't, save money in order to loan it out. Like I said, some sort of war could totally affect the supply of loanable funds. Things that affect people's willingness. Another great one of supply shifter for loanable funds would be government taxing, right? So government increases capital gains, and it's less profitable to put your money in to work for you and get a higher rate of return. Then you're not going to do it as much. You might as well keep your money in cash or something, right? All right, we are going to switch over. So here's the plan right now. What I want to do is I'm going to switch over to my computer screen. I'm going to show you guys something. A couple things, actually. We'll start off and do that. So here we go. I'm getting all sweaty. Forgive me.
Yeah, disgusting, Mr. Clifford. Oh.
Okay, I'm back. So I'm going to switch over to my screen, and I'm going to show you these wonderful people. Yay! This is me and my beautiful wife. We're hanging out together. Let's go ahead and talk about this darn test. Let's switch and talk about multiple choice. All right, what you're looking at is the breakdown of what they asked on the multiple choice from 2016, 2015, 14, 13. What I did is I went down through each one, and I basically, you can see this, figured out how often they ask certain questions. Now, why is this important for you? Well, this is going to tell you what to spend your time on. People are asking for some things that I didn't even bring up because they don't ask very often about those questions. You're going to see one question about scarcity, the general idea of unlimited wants and limited resources. You'll see 2 questions, the production possibilities curve, sometimes calculating opportunity cost, sometimes talking about shifting. You'll see some questions about the idea of maybe the curve being straight or bowed out. One question about the circular flow, right? The idea of the resource market and the product market. And of course, you're going to find a comparative advantage question. Now, if you're only taking the micro, which obviously you're not, you wouldn't have to spend a lot of time talking about or reviewing comparative advantage. But since you're taking macro, you got to do it. Not just for these multiple choice, but because sometimes they ask it on free responses. You're going to see maybe a few questions on regular supply and demand, but you can see not many. Unit 1, there's not much there. The vast majority of the stuff. By the way, I want to point out, I wasn't done with the 2016 column, if you're wondering. So I got 30 of the questions done. I was working on them today, so I'd be kind of fresh for our conversation today. All right, so you can look at 2015 probably is a better one to look at. All right, take a look. GDP, what's included, not included is in there. You're going to talk about unemployment. You're always going to get at least 2 questions about unemployment. Is it frictional or structural or cyclical? You're going to get some sort of question talking about maybe the unemployment rate, or who's not counted. You're going to see a few questions about the natural rate of unemployment and obviously inflation. But notice, look, dudes, look. CPI is only one question. So if you struggled with calculating the CPI and understanding exactly, how to get those numbers, dude, that's only worth 1 point. Do not spend all your time. In fact, I'm telling you right now, don't spend all your time worrying about CPI and GDP deflator if not worth that many points. You're going to see maybe a question about the velocity and quantity theory of money. Remember, that's the idea that the amount of money out there times the velocity amount of money equals the price times the quantity. And it shows you that as prices, or as money goes up, they put more money in the system, you're going to get higher prices. This is where things go crazy. This is Unit 3, and like I said, focus over here because I hadn't finished this column. These are a lot of where the questions are. These are what I reviewed with you guys earlier. This is why I did it. It's because you're going to see a lot of questions about aggregate demand, why it shifts, sometimes why it's shaped the way that it is. Aggregate supply, why it shifts. The whole idea of stagflation is in there. The long run aggregate supply, how it's shaped. This is the idea of the economy adjusting back to long run. So when you're a recessionary gap or an inflationary gap, the economy can readjust. Demand, cost, pull, inflation, Phillips curve. Phillips curve only has 2 multiple choice, but it can be, like we said, can be one of the graphs in the free response. Fiscal policy, taxes, spending, the spending multiplier, being able to do that. And the idea of, a few other things, disposable income, definition question, and the idea of long run growth, right? All curves are shifting to the right because of more investment. That's where you want to spend your time, and also this unit. Take a look at that bad boy. Right? A lot of questions talk about monetary policy, open market operations. I mean, look at that. If you know, and dude, these questions 9, 11, and 14 on the 2016 test, I just looked at them. They were basic, open market operations causes what? It's really easy stuff. But if you don't know what open market operations is, and you don't know what buying and selling bonds is, then you're not going to go very far in those questions. So you see a lot of questions going here, and so do the free responses, right? You have to be able to draw loanable funds, money market. And the last units right here, you can see most of the questions are going to be focusing on exchange rates and its effect on the net exports. In fact, what we'll end up doing here is what we'll do. We'll go back and go back over those relationships we did back in the beginning in a second. So if that makes sense, which I hope that it totally did, let's do this. What am I doing? Let's switch back over to here. So I hope that this is all making sense to you guys, that you enjoy this. Keep in mind, people who just showed up, if you did, these aren't the most important terms in the world. Don't get confused on this. We're going to take a quiz in a few minutes. We might go a little time over. I'm supposed to end this at 6, but you guys are my priority. So let's get this thing done so you guys are totally ready. One more time I want to stress, and so that's what I'm going to show you here. It's super important to keep in mind that you got to get the easy ones right. So some people, like I said, are asking me about the really hard stuff. The hard stuff is not the key. The things that you can get. Best way to get ready for any test is always to do practice test questions. So sit down, ask your teacher for a test, take a look at my ultimate review packet, take a look at those tests, sit down, try it. Because there's a difference between saying, okay, I understand monetary policy and I understand that equation or that graph that's asking me to really apply it. So do those multiple choice questions for sure. So right now what we're going to do is I want to switch over back over to answering some of your questions. Difference between cost push and stagflation. There's none. Christopher asks, what's the difference between cost push and stagflation? There is no difference. It's just the idea that if there's more costs, it costs more to produce stuff, then aggregate supply shifts to the left. And that's the same idea as causes stagflation. Demand pull is the idea that demand goes up, causing inflation. So there's only 2 ways to get inflation. Demand goes up or supply goes down. That's it. All right, back to your questions. Here we go. What do we got here? What do we got? Some folks from New Jersey. Difference between... Yeah. Hey, you're great, Christopher. Yeah, I don't see any more questions. I'm going to stay here for a second, let you guys catch up to me. I think there's maybe like a 10-second delay. How much, these are great. Now we're getting some good stuff. How much detail will you need to know about circular flow? I'll ask you a question, and this will answer that question for you. Do businesses supply or demand? Well, they both, right? They supply in the product market and they demand in the resource market. So if you just keep track that there's two different markets, the one for resources and the one for products, you're pretty much going to be fine on the circular flow. But Mr. Clifford, the hard questions are the ones that are confusing, hard to get right, so we need help on them. That's a good point. I mean, William, you got a good point. But what I'm trying to say is, if you focus on the hard questions, right? So think about this. This is an economic concept. You can either make profit doing this, right, if you're running a business, or you can do a lot more energy and time and spend profit doing that. Spend your time on the thing that brings you more profit. And in this case, understanding and practicing those basic ideas and making sure you got them down is where you want to start. If you miss, like I said, 5, 10 multiple choice questions, still get a 5. Not the end of the world. I mean, obviously, your teacher maybe doesn't want to tell you that, but I'm being realistic. If your goal is to pass the thing, and our goal is, so what do? Well, you focus on the things that get you the most points first, and then you start jumping into the other stuff. But that's okay. We'll keep going. Do bank balance sheets always have to be equal? For our purposes, yes, they'll set you up with the assets equaling the liabilities. Yes, and it balances out. It's an accounting thing. Yep. Business cycle. Hugh! Oh, Hugh. Hugh. I have one of my students named Hugh. I like the guy, but he's different in a weird way. This thing keeps popping up ahead. Yeah, there's no calculator on the test, so keep that in mind. What are the 5 most important graphs? Sydney, we covered that. They are aggregate demand, Phillips curve, the money market, the loanable funds, and foreign exchange. Totally super important. If you just showed up right now, go back and watch the video. We totally went over it. You're totally going to get it too. All right. So there are so many people asking about bank balance sheets. Here's what we're going to do. And you deserve this. So let's go do a free response on the bank balance sheet. So you guys feel a little comfortable. So let's pick one randomly. I'm going to go over it pretty fast. Keep in mind, I've already done free responses on 20 free responses. They're part of the Ultimate Review Packet where I did the free response. I literally just did a video on it. The reason you don't have access to it is because you need the Ultimate Review Pack to get access to it. So it's on my channel, but it's just hidden. Anyways, so what I'm going to do is I am going into my test bank to go find a free response that's going to focus entirely on bank balance sheets. So let's go jump on that grenade and see if you guys get it. It seems like there's a lot of confusion, and last year there was some confusion about bank balance sheets in general. And students didn't do well. So sometimes I'll ask the question over again if students kind of suck at something. We'll see if it's this year. I don't think it will be, but it's always good to see and try. Which one? Okay, this is the one that I'm going to want to do. Let's take a look at this. Let me transfer you guys over here. All right. So don't leave. People don't take off. I want you guys to get this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to free response, bank balance sheets, because everyone keeps asking. I'm not going to do deflator. I'm not going to actually have time for that. But I did do a video about the deflator. So I'm going to do bank balance sheets, make sure you see the free response, and then do some multiple choice questions. And we'll get out of here close on time. But if you want to hang out, man, we'll make more videos. Why not? All right, we're going to go to the screen, and we're going to the PowerPoint. And here we go. I'm going to check to make sure you can see that. You guys can see that, right? You can't. Ooh, I'm glad I checked. That would have been really weird if I talked about a free response for 20 minutes that you couldn't see. Okay. What you're looking at is a bank balance sheet question. You've got liabilities and assets. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the demand deposits for a bank are liabilities. They got to pay these people back their $10,000. right? Owner's equity is that amount of money that the owner of the bank had to start the bank in the first place, right? So assets are right there, and they show you what's on the right, right? The $20,000 this bank has. With the $20,000, they have $2,000 in required reserves that obviously they have to hold according to law. They have 0 in excess reserves, right? They've loaned out $8,000 to customers. They bought $7,000 of bonds, and there's another $3,000 of the actual bank, like in the building, like they spent the money on the actual building of the bank. First question is, based on this, what is the required reserve ratio? Now, it's a great question because students always go, well, wait, is it, do I have to use 10,000 or 20,000? Like, that's the part they get tripped up on. And the answer is, they only have to use demand deposit. So you don't have to hold required reserves on owner's equity just on the demand deposit. So it's $2,000 they're holding of $10,000. So the answer right here is 0.2. Required reserve ratio, or the required reserve ratio is 0.2, or 20%. All right, I'm going to let you do B completely on your own. Try it on your own. See how you do. All right, you ready? Yeah. Suppose the Fed purchases $5,000 worth of bonds from Sewell Bank. What will be the change in the dollar value of each of the following immediately after the purchase? Okay, all right, here we go. So what's going to happen is this $5,000 that the bank, that the Fed is buying, this number falls down to $2,000, right? That $5,000 becomes excess reserves they can loan out. So the right answer in BI is $5,000 increase in excess reserves. Demand deposits, they don't change. I mean, why would they, right? That doesn't make any sense. Not more customers showed up. So in this case, there'd be no change in the demand deposits whatsoever. Great. Now in C, calculate the maximum amount of money supply that can change the result of the $5,000 purchase of bonds. Well, this one is your classic money multiplier situation. And by the way, I want to point out, people are all confused about bank balance sheets. It's literally just money supply stuff. It's the whole idea of the money multiplier. So if the required reserve ratio, which we already said was 20% or 0.2, that means the multiplier is 5, right? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the video what the multiplier is. 5 times 5,000 gives you the right answer, which is 25,000. The answer to this one is money supply can increase up to $25,000. In D, when the Federal Reserve purchased bonds, what will be the price? What will happen to the price of bonds in the open market, and then why? That's a great question, right? They've been asking more questions about the idea of bond prices and how they're related. So in this case, when the Fed purchases bonds, Fed buys bonds, money supply becomes bigger, right? That decreases interest rates. Lower interest rates will increase bond prices. So it's one of the relationships. Lower interest rates increase bond prices. Why? I actually have the answers. I just pulled it up on my phone on this one. They wanted this as the answer. They said because the purchase of bonds increases the money supply, which decreases interest rates. In other words, you don't have to fully explain why. I mean, the real reason why is because if you're to buy a bond, do you want to buy an old bond or a new bond, right? And if new bonds are a low interest rate, right, then people are going to want to buy the old bonds, and the old bonds prices will increase. Now, if you didn't get that, don't worry about it. All you had to say was because interest rates will fall. That was D. In E, last one, and this is the reason why I gave it to you, is to clarify everything. Suppose instead that, instead of purchasing bonds, an individual deposits $5,000 in cash into their checking, right? So somebody walks in and says, hey, here's $5,000. What is the immediate effect on the cash deposits of M1 money supply? And the right answer is there is no change. What? No change, right? Because there is no change to the money supply when someone deposits $5,000. Initially, because $5,000 in your pocket is exactly the same as $5,000 in the bank, right? So it's the same darn thing. Now that's the idea of bank balance sheets. If you want to practice more of them, take a look at my website, go back to that and check out the free responses. It'll tell you exactly what free responses were given what year on that as well. Does that make sense? You guys feel good about that? Sure, I'm not sure if that was enough for you, but that's a great example of what you actually might see. You guys are pulling up the answers. That's good. That's good. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, you waited for it, and now here it is. I'm going to tweet it out as well. What I'm going to give you guys right now is my predictions for the 2017 macro for responses. Now, I want to point out before I tell you guys this, I have no clue. I grade AP tests, but they obviously don't tell me, and that would be cheating if they did. And even the people who write the test, they don't exactly know what the test question, they read a bunch of them, and they're not sure which one actually is going to make it in. So we don't know. And what I want you to do is have your teacher guess too. Ask your teacher to write their prediction on the board, and you guys write down your predictions and take a guess, right? Here is my guess, ladies and gentlemen, 2017 predictions. I think this year it's going to start off with aggregate demand and supply with a recessionary gap, just like we did earlier. So we, a few minutes ago, drew a recessionary gap. I think that's what it's going to be, except I think they're going to ask for some sort of long-run adjustment. So aggregate supply is going to shift, and then they're going to add in monetary policy with the money market and open market operations. Maybe, I don't know. I have no clue. I don't know. But that's my guess this year. I can almost 100% guarantee it's going to be aggregate demand and supply because it almost always is. It's like 95%. Always aggregate demand, aggregate supply, long run, short run, all that good stuff. Fair response number 2, I think, is going to be loan funds with crowding out and talk about economic growth. So just like the fair response or the question we asked earlier, except they'll ask the next, I think it's going to be the next question would be, okay, if interest rates go up, what happens to growth? And growth would go down, right? And then the last question I think is going to be foreign exchange and its effect on exports. A pretty basic question on, draw the value of the currency, and then if this event occurs, what's going to happen? If this event occurs, what's going to happen? And then how does that affect net exports? I don't know. This is what I'm thinking. I'll send out a tweet as well. Follow me on Twitter if you don't already do so. I've been posting a bunch of different teachers' best predictions, but that's what I think it's going to be. Okay? Now, that makes sense, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what we're going to do now. We are going to switch to a new mode. We're going to do multiple choice questions. We've got 18 minutes left for review, but what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to give you some multiple choice questions, and I'm going to go really quick through them, but I want you to pause. Do you know what I'm saying? So you can pause the live stream and then do the answers, and then I'll go over the answers. I think that's the best way to do it, and then I can say goodbye to you guys. But the only problem is we're going to be off on our time. So we're going to have you guys be on a completely different time than me. So our questioning thing is probably not going to work out as well. So let's do this again. Let's switch back to a few questions from you guys. If you want to ask a personal question, you can. Not that personal, but like a person that's it's snack time. It's time to chill out for a second before we do some multiple choice. So let's see some of your questions. Austin High School in El Paso, Texas. Mike Jägermeister. Nice to see you. Crowding out. Is it when demand loans increases? Yep. Zach, you're welcome. What questions do you guys have? So we're going to have to do about, say, 7 minutes of questions before we switch over. Why, somebody just add, why does interest rates and bond prices have inverse relationships? Again, the concept, it has to do with the idea of bonds in the first place. Bonds can be issued, right, for like 30 years, 10 years, whatever, and they can be bought back, or, they can be back by the person who issued it, or they can be bought by other people, right? So when it comes to bond prices, if there's a really high interest rate, right, I'd rather have the new bonds with a higher interest rate than the old ones that have the low interest rate. So the demand's going to fall for the old ones that have the low interest rate. So demand goes down, price goes down for the old bonds, right, when the interest rate goes up. So they're inverse related. Shout out to the Quick and Dirty. If you haven't seen my Unit 1 summary video, I talk about the Quick and Dirty. I think it's a pretty funny example. So, by the way, you want to do me a favor? Obviously, get the ultimate review packet. But other than that, I'm hoping you have done that already. If you want to do me a favor, it would be great if on the AP test you do a little shout out to me, like, hey, Mr. Clifford, you rock. or something like that. That's always cool, especially if you take the micro, because I'll be able to see it. I grade thousands of those darn tests. But it's always cool to see that somebody who's watched my videos. So if you want to do that, that would be awesome. If you don't, that's cool too. But there you go. Mr. D'Angelo, shout out. This thing keeps pushing me higher. No, I will not go to prom with you. I'm sorry. I can't go to prom. I'm married. I couldn't date. Not going to prom with you. When does the Phillips curve shift? That is a good question. The Phillips curve shifts when the short run aggregate supply shifts. So I tell my students that it does this, if this helps you, right? So whenever aggregate supply shifts, the Phillips curve actually shifts the opposite direction. Just remember this, when aggregate demand shifts, then that moves along the Phillips curve. So when aggregate supply shifts, that actually must cause the short run Phillips curve to actually move. Yep. Keep going down. What's non-discretionary fiscal policy? Great question. Discretionary fiscal policy is the idea that when the government wants the economy to do something, they increase spending or taxes. They do something and they don't have to, right? So like a stimulus package, that's discretionary. It's up to their discretion. Non-discretionary is the idea that these are automatic stabilizers that are already in place. So for example, transfer payments, right? When the economy is doing poorly, and we go into a recession, we automatically increase government spending on transfer payments because people are losing their jobs, and they fall in lower tax brackets. So tax brackets, taxes automatically fall. So that kind of gets the economy up and going again. So these things work counter-cyclically. That's the idea. It's called non-discretionary fiscal policy. Someone asked a really important question. How does money supply affect interest rates? Great question. It's about as important as it actually gets. Money supply increase will an increase in money supply will lower interest rates. Yep. Yeah. Somebody asked, what's the margin utility of this orange? That's funny. That's actually pretty funny because I haven't had it yet. It's also funny because that's how economists think, right? The additional satisfaction you get from another orange. I'm trying to figure out a way to sneak it without you guys noticing. Anyway. All right. Shout out to Mrs. Foster and her school. Yes. Shout out to you. Explain the difference between different money accounts such as M1, M2. The AP test doesn't spend too much time talking about M1 and M2. M1 is the one you need to know. That's the one we've been talking about. M1 is the idea of, cash, obviously, that's out there, and money in people's checking accounts, that's M1, and travelers checks. But the concepts of, M1, M2, and the old M3, they're not huge things on the AP test. So if you're planning on taking this class in college, you can learn more about like the details, the monetary basis stuff. But for our class, we don't really do that many details. It's a good question, though. Great question. All right. I think, like I said, you guys are behind me a little bit. I'll keep waiting for other questions. Christopher, I saw your funny videos. Send them to me. Let me see. Shout out to Miss Smith. Aloha High School. Are you in Hawaii? Listen, if you're in Hawaii, I'm not even joking right now. I will come visit you guys. Give me a place to stay. Find the richest kid that you guys at your school, your class, and I'll come stay at their house. I'll do a workshop and train you guys, work with you guys. Ask your teacher. I'll go out to Hawaii, no doubt about it. Super awesome. Rachel asks, what's CPI? CPI is Consumer Price Index. Basically, it shows you how prices change relative to a base year. It's this number that's good. It's a good idea, but again, not essential, at least for the AP test. I can go over sticky wages and flexible wages. This is the idea of Keynes thought that wages were sticky, so the economy doesn't really self-correct very fast. And classical economists think that wages are wages are flexible. And so when aggregate demand falls, it's not going to be too long before wages go down and the economy readjusts. Again, I've never seen the AP test use the term sticky wages. They do allude to it, though. Yeah. What causes demand for money to decrease? Why would you not want demand for money, right? So a decrease in price level, right? If inflation prices go down, then I don't need as much money to go buy things, right? That could be a potential one. And anything else that would make me feel like, yeah, I don't need to hold as much money. For example, if I can make more money doing something else, like, if there is I can come all sorts of situations, but you want general shifters, right? Just anything that would decrease your asset demand or your transaction demand. Anything that makes you go, you know what, I don't really want to hold money. I'll go hold a different asset instead. Or something that says, yeah, I don't need to hold money to buy stuff anymore, right? Brandon asks if I am communist. I don't think I look much communist or seem like I am. I'm pretty much of a market guy. Just let you know, hopefully you don't feel like I've ever pushed my political views on you as I made videos over the years. I try to keep them out of there. I want you guys to have your own thoughts and have your own minds. So if I'm Keynesian or classical, most of those things I'm trying to teach for AP tests. But the truth is, I'm kind of down the middle with almost everything. And when it comes to the economy, we need the government. We need the government out sometimes. We need the government in sometimes. It kind of depends on a case-by-case basis. So, in 2008, when the economy went to the crapper, and in 2009 stimulus package, we needed that one. The whole idea of systemic risk with banks, if those banks fell, you have no idea how close we were to all driving, on riding donkeys. Like seriously, right now we'd all be on donkeys. There would be no internet, no YouTube, no nothing if the government didn't get involved and say, okay, everyone, it's cool, we got this. Even if they didn't get it, but just coming in and saying we got this, it's a mind game, right? Economics is dealing with people, and people, yeah, you get it. What's the money multiplier? These are good questions that are coming out here. I've done the calculations. I used it earlier. The money multiplier is similar to the spending multiplier. There's two different multipliers. The money multiplier shows you how money gets created, right? It's the idea of 1 over the reserve requirement. The spending multiplier is 1 over the marginal propensity to save. And if that confuses you, don't. They're both 1 over how much you save. So just remember, 1 over how much you save is this idea of the multiplier. Money that gets put in banks gets loaned out, and that money gets loaned out, and that money gets loaned out over and over again. And then money that gets spent becomes someone's income, and people save a portion, and that becomes somebody else's income, and that keeps happening over and over again. So they're both the same concept, looking at two different ways. Good question, though. Great question. You kidding me? Really brought it down here. Really brought it down. Brought the excitement down. Sorry, we'll get it back up again. Brandon, sorry. Gotcha. Oh, snap. Why did my teacher say that when government borrows crowding out that it should move supply? Ooh, dude, Jennifer. Great. So Jennifer and anybody else who uses the ManQ textbook, there's another way of looking at crowding out, which is a decrease in supply of loanable funds. So I had shown the increase in demand. You can also do it as a decrease in supply. And the reason why, we can use the technical stuff if we want to, but basically as there's less supply to be loaned out, right? If the government's borrowing, that means there's less supply of loans available for other people to borrow out, interest rates go up. But either way, whether demand goes up or supply goes down, interest rates are going to go up. So to answer Jennifer's question about crowding out, you can show it either way. On the AP test, usually they say show it, and you can show either one and you're right. And so on the rubrics, we actually have two different answers, and we'll accept either one, either demand up or supply down. So don't freak out about that. He is all right. You guys are so funny to each other. Is he lying about what? You talking to me? I'm sorry, by the way, I'm not getting to everybody. I know that's annoying. Why are price floors and price ceilings implemented? That's more of a micro question. It's a good question, but Diana, I don't think you'll see many ceilings. I just looked at the last 3 tests before I got on air right now, and I did not see any ceilings or floors. So they haven't seen them. That doesn't mean they can't ask them, but they haven't recently. I think Dominic asked this question a couple times. Why a recessionary gap is to the right? When I drew that old recessionary gap earlier, please note that the recessionary gap, the long run aggregate supply is to the right because that's where we want to be, and we're producing less than that. And if we're producing less than that, it means we must be, less. We're here, and we want to be over there, so that's why the long run supply is on the right, if that makes sense. But if you put it on the other side, that's called an inflationary gap, right? Yes. We're going to do the multiple choice in a second. Let's get to the multiple choice. I just want to see if you have any more questions. So we got this. All right. Also, shout out to Ross Graham. Okay, one more favor. So we already said you're doing me a favor by getting the Ultimate Review Packet. We already said you're doing me a favor by saying, hey, Mr. Clifford, you rock on your AP test. Do me another favor. Ask your teacher if they're interested in hanging out with me. I'm interested in doing some workshops with teachers here in California. Invite them to my house, or maybe we'll go to like a hotel ballroom and we'll do some workshops. But it was a good idea because next year I'm teaching less classes than I am this year. And I could use the money, honestly. But I can also enjoy working with other econ teachers and stuff. So share that out with other people. We're going to start this thing up and run in. Hey, I love you. Well, I love you too. We're going to switch over, ladies and gentlemen, to some multiple choice questions. Now, these multiple choice questions I made particularly designed, right, to make sure you guys understand some of the basics. I'm giving you 10 multiple choice questions. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put it on the screen. You pause the video if you want to, and I'm going to rush through the answers, and then you can go, you pause it and go from there, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Here we go. First question. Pause if you want to. Now. And then here we go. Which of the following example of frictional unemployment? Frictional unemployment is the idea between jobs, right? So an old employee taking voluntary retirement, that's not going to be it. A worker is replaced by computers. No, that's going to be structural. Tradesperson laid off in a recession, no, that's cyclical. And part-time B is not right either because people who work part-time are still considered fully employed. So it's not going to be that. The right answer was A, a recent graduate looking for their first job. So that's it. A is the idea of frictional unemployment. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep switching out to new questions and then try your next one. We'll go from there. Okay, for this one, you obviously need the graph. Now, I'm starting off with easy questions because, again, that's where you want to start. Make sure you got these ones down. You should get 10 out of 10 on this, quite frankly. So in this one, it says, if aggregate demand were to unexpectedly increase, which is a shift to the right, a shift on the right means it goes up. So price level is going to go up, no doubt about it. So it had to be D or E. And unemployment, not employment, right? But unemployment is going to go down, right? There's going to be less unemployment because we're producing more stuff, hiring more workers. So it's got to be D was the right answer on that one. In fact, if you want to, and in fact, I like this idea. Some people are doing writing the answers. No, don't write the answers because I don't want to give it away to other people. Yeah, so if you write answers, please, kind of stop doing that. Unless, of course, I guess you could, whatever. If you do it and then, you just trust yourself not to look, that's cool, I guess. All right, that makes sense. It is now time to do another question. We'll wait for it. All right, ready and go. All right, a leftward shift in the aggregate short-run aggregate supply curve will result of. So this is what would cause, right? So in this one, central bank sale of government securities. If the central bank sells bonds, they sell bonds, makes the money supply smaller, increases interest rates, right? That would not do what we're talking about. That's an aggregate demand shifter. So B is not it. An increase in capital stock would be an aggregate demand shifter. That's not going to do it. Tax credits for capital investments, that's not going to do it. So it's going to decrease the aggregate supply. Decrease in personal income taxes? No, that's not going to do it. Answer is E. That's right, E. An increase in input prices. If prices go up for resources, that means it's more expensive to produce stuff. Aggregate supply is going to shift to the left. That, my friends, is the idea of stagflation. That's stagflation, or the idea of cost push inflation. So, yeah, you got that one right, correct? I hope so. Uh-oh. I erased. So here we go. Here comes another one for you. Good luck. I'm just going to jump into it. So, which of the following would be appropriate fiscal policy to close a $100 billion gap if the marginal expense to consume is 0.8? Well, the multiplier is 1 over the MPS, which is 1 over 0.2. 1 over 0.2 is 5. And so how do you close a $100 billion gap? If it's a recessionary gap, if the multiplier is 5, you have to spend $20 billion. So an increased government spending or expenditures of $20 billion, 20 times 5 closes the gap. The answer was A. Right, the right answer right there was A. How'd you do? How you guys doing? You guys getting this stuff? Great. Thinking, oh man, I need harder ones. You don't, believe it or not. You don't need the harder ones because these are the ones they're going to ask. Right? These are the things you got to know. The real hard ones, cool. Practice them. But these are the kind of questions you're going to see. Here comes another. Okay, there are three types of unemployment. 2 of them will happen all the time. The economy is experienced in structural and frictional unemployment. D is the right answer. Full employment. Remember, we started at the very beginning talking about 5% in the United States is the natural rate of unemployment. D is the right answer. Let's think about it. You got it. All right, here comes another. So we're talking about unanticipated inflation here. So take out a fixed mortgage rate at 8%. Now they thought it was going to be 4% inflation, right? If the actual inflation turned out to be 5%, right? Who benefited from this unexpected change? Number one, we know that it's going to be Daniel. Daniel is going to benefit because higher inflation means that he's paying back, right, with lower purchasing power. So it's got to be Daniel. The question is, what's the real interest rate? Well, the real interest rate is 3%. 3% is E was the right answer, right? It's the nominal rate. The nominal rate that was charged 8% minus that 5% of inflation, right? Make sense? All right, cool. Let's try another one. Here you go. All right, quick break. I got a text from a guy named Mark Salazar. When I first started teaching, he taught at my school. He's gone. I wish he was back. I love the man. If you're Mr. Salazar's student, you are super lucky. He taught me so much. And again, I don't want to get all emotional here, but I'm telling you, teachers don't work in a vacuum. They watch and they steal ideas from other people. And I've always loved this guy, Mark Salazar. Thank you. He just texted me and said, you're doing a great job, my friend, which is awesome. So you're the man, Salazar. You're the man. Here we go. Assume the country is experiencing a recessionary gap. Which of the following actions would a central bank most likely engage in? So we can throw out anything that has anything to do with taxes. C, out. That's not it. A, out, because both of those things, they have to do with fiscal policy. So that can't be it. Now we're trying to fight a recession. So there's 3 options. Remember, reserve requirement, discount rate, open market operations. Let's look at B. Increase in discount rate, that's thrown out. They got to lower the discount rate. Not going to be B. Sell bonds, open market operations. Nope, we don't want to sell bonds to fight inflation. We want to buy bonds, or the Fed wants to buy bonds. E, buy bonds in the open market operations and decrease the discount rate. E is the right answer. That's going to expand the economy, expansionary monetary policy. That was the right answer. E. All right, next one's up and running. Here we go. Okay, this one's getting a little harder, right? Now we're talking about bond prices, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. The Federal Reserve, now notice I'm doing monetary policy again because they ask a lot of monetary policy questions. So the Federal Reserve is going to buy bonds. So they buy government securities or bonds. Buying bonds increases the money supply. It's got to be A or B, which will decrease interest rates, right? Which will increase bond prices. So you got to keep in mind, remember we talked about relationships? Interest rates and bond prices are inversely related. So when you saw interest rates go down and bond prices go up, that had to be one of the answers. And money supply, when the money supply goes up, that means the interest rates go down. So if you know relationships, these questions are easy. The right answer is B, increase money supply, lowers interest rates, increases those bond prices. There it is. All right. So if that made sense, here we go. 9th question. And good luck. All right, here we go. This is asking about the graph. This is an example of if you know the graph, you got the answer. The right answer is D. Supply of loanable funds is vertical and set by the Fed. No, that's the money market. The supply and demand loanable funds is good old-fashioned supply and demand curve. The concept of the money demand and supply is this concept, ugly graph, but you get the idea. D is the right answer. Supply of loanable funds is vertical is wrong, right? All these are true except for D. Okay, we've got one question remaining. This is it. How you doing? A great question. Remember in Unit 5, when we talk about balance of payments, you gotta remember that balance of payments talks about, inside balance of payments is balance of trade, right? So I understand the idea of exports and imports, right? How they, if you export more than you import, you have a trade surplus. If you import more than you export, then you have a trade deficit. So that's basically the idea of what's called the current account. The answer on this one, so we're understanding, is the answer, balance of trade would be C. The answer is C on this one. And the reason why is if the Canadian dollar it becomes more valuable, Canadian dollar is more valuable, that means other countries are not going to buy as much Canadian stuff because it's more expensive to buy their currency and therefore their products. And Canadians are going to buy more of other countries' stuff. So imports for Canada are going to go up. Exports are going to go down. And since imports are a negative number, that's going to decrease their net exports. So C is a way of saying that Canadian balance of trade will move towards a deficit, is basically saying they're importing more than they're exporting because their currency appreciated. All right, so the answer was C. Now, I purposely chose 10 for a reason. How did you do? Even if you missed a few of them, if you missed the 3, you got 7 out of 10. That's not that bad. Don't freak out about it. Remember, our goal in the first place is to pass this test. Passing this test, that is the goal. So remember, 10 questions. How did you do? In fact, post me. Let me know. How'd you do? Anybody get 10 out of 10? Let's see what you guys got. Right? I know I'm behind you guys a little bit here, but what'd you get? Did you get 10 out of 10? Did you get, 3 out of 10? These questions I actually took a few of them from my stuff and a few from other locations. But basically, these are some of the questions you're going to see. Some are easy. Unemployment's an easy one. But this AP test, most of the questions look like these. This is exactly what they look like. You got to know open market operations. You got to understand the idea of crowding out, loanable funds, understand what the graphs look like, and you should be fine. Anyways, 8 out of 10 from Sarah Lee. That's awesome. Joseph got 9 out of 10. William got 9 out of 10. Are you guys all missing the same one? Sharon, Chris, Jen, Hannah, 9 out of 10. Sharon got, I think it was 8 out of 10. 9 out of 10. 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. Jennifer got 9 out of 10. Sergio got 8 out of 10. Zach got most. John got 8 out of 10. 9 out of 10. 11 out of 10. You're funny, dude. You're funny. Okay, so what we're going to do is this. And we are over time, and I know that. And I'm okay with doing that. I want to go all the way back and do those relationships. Those relationships of all the things I showed you this entire time is by far the most important thing. But I mean, not even like close. Not even like a little close. It's by far the most important thing completely. So why? It's right here. So this will be our last thing. We'll finish off, okay? Macroeconomics is all about relationships. If you were to go back the whole video, which I'm not expecting you to do, but if you did, you would notice that if you understand the relationships between two things, you've pretty much got the answer every time. This causes that causes this, that causes that. Boom, right? You get the right answer every time. Here are the main relationships in this class. This is it. These are the relationships that you got to know. What I want you to do is number 1 through 15 on your piece of paper. In all the cases, I'm having it go up, right? Up. So interest rates go up, taxes go up, government spending go up. Obviously, if you know that, what happens that way, then you should know the opposite as well. So you know they're either positively correlated or negatively correlated. So for each one of these, I want you to identify what's going to happen to, the first one does this, what's the second one going to do, okay? You're completely on your own. Go for it. Matthew said this looks like actual torture. It's hilarious. Shout out to Elizabeth O'Boyle. You're awesome. Thank you. I mean it. Seriously, thanks. Par Hills. Shout out to Coach Duran. Somebody asked about a free response. I'm just going to keep talking as you work. About investment. Sunny Days said, do you have to show what happens to consumption? You could. Investment up, consumption up. Either one's fine. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a good question. I wish I could pronounce your name, and I'm sorry I can't. But current account versus financial account, what's the difference? Current account is for goods and services that you trade between countries. So the balance payment has 2 accounts. Balance payment, 2 accounts. Current account, financial account. Current account is made up of the trade of goods and services between countries. Also has remittance in there. These are things that the deal is done. I bought your stuff. It's over. The financial account has to do with financial assets where the deal is not done. You're still going to earn money off it. So if you buy a hotel in another country, you're still planning on getting some money back from that hotel. You're running a business. You're buying a bond in that country. You're still going to get money back. So anything that's generating money actually counts towards the financial account. The actual money you get goes towards the actual current account. But there's 2 different accounts in the balance of payments. It's a good question. Really good question. Thank you. Hey, Fark Momo said, you saved my econ grade this year. You're welcome, man. S multiplier stood for spending multiplier for Angela. Yes, micro is tomorrow. Review session micro tomorrow. Please tell your friends. Let's get more people. We had a boatload of people show up and watch this, which is good. Jennifer, I'm glad I can help. I think I mentioned you 3 times today. You rock, Jennifer. Okay, I'm going to go over these answers for you guys. So here we go. All right. If you're not ready, pause the video. I'm going to get all the right answers in front of you so you can see it. I'm really going to quickly go over them. I went actually most of them in our review session, tell the truth. Here we go. Bam. There they are. So, all right. Interest rates and investment. Most important one. That's everything you need for monetary policy. If interest rate goes up, then interest rate goes up, then investment's going to go down. Taxes, of course, makes sense. More taxes means less disposable income and less consumer spending. Government spending going up. National income is the idea of just GDP, so more GDP. The marginal propensity to consume. If people spend more of new income coming in, then the the spending multiplier would go up. So that's the simple spending multiplier, the S multiplier. Capital stock would mean more growth, right? If you have more machines, tools, and factories. That's the idea of all 3 curves shifting. All 3 curves, the aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and the long run supply all shifting to the right. Inflation and real wages, which makes sense, right? I said this earlier. If inflation goes up, then the real wage you're earning is actually falling. And same thing for inflation going up, the real interest rate. So if your inflation goes up unexpectedly 5%, then the real interest rate, you're paying on a loan or getting back money from a loan it's fallen, right? Deficit spending, interest rates. Hey, look at 8. This is going to test your ability at this class. When you read 8, your brain should have gone beep, beep, and said a word. 2 words, actually. When you saw 8, deficit spending, increase in interest rates. Crowding out. You should go, crowding out. If you actually thought that, yep, that's crowding out, dude, you're unstoppable. You're going to do great. Cheers to you. Seriously, you're going to do really good on the test because you're starting to see the concepts. Now, notice in 9, 10, 11, and 12, that's all monetary policy, right? It's just, do you understand the relationships? So money supply goes up, that means interest rates would fall. If you increase the reserve requirement, there's less money out there. Increase discount rate, banks can't borrow from the Fed as easy. Money supply would fall. The Fed buys bonds, that increases money supply. In 3, 4, and 5, at least in 3 and 4, we're talking about international value of money and currency. International value of dollar would go up, which means if the dollar appreciated, the net exports is going to fall, right? We did a question like that earlier. So remember this, appreciation is not a good thing or a bad thing, it's just a thing. So if a currency appreciates, then people are going to buy less of your stuff. So net exports is going to go down. And then 14, interest rates go up. That means more people, other countries' people are going to put money into your country, right? So that'll increase inflow of capital into your country. And last one, interest rates and bond prices. I put it on here. It's not the most important one, but it's an easy multiple choice question if they ask you about it. You can just knock that out of the park. They're inversely related, okay? So, last thing, and we're going to finish off strong. We gave you my prediction. We told you all that good stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for me to give you what you've been waiting for, which is a pep talk. I'm going to continue with this pep talk on the day before the test. What was that, Tuesday? Before the AP test, I'll pull up another live stream and we'll talk, really quick, give you a pep talk, do a real quick review, make sure you got your brain up and running for this test. But seriously, guys, I mean it. The AP macro test is easy. And they don't think that looking at it like, I got all these things to review. It's not. You have to attack it like an economist. You got to think, okay, the goal is to pass. If the goal is to pass, I'm going to attack it like an economist. I'm going to focus on the things that I know, practice as much as you can. Draw all 5 graphs. If seriously, I know you're probably tired right now, but seriously, stop, turn the paper over, draw all 5 graphs. Like just doing now will help solidify it in your brain. Those 5 graphs are what's on the test. And then those 12 skills that I showed you would also be on the test. In the very beginning, I talked about that. So make sure you practice those things because that's what's on the fear response. Get a lot of points in the fear response. And keep in mind, the multiple choice, you're going to see some easy questions on multiple choice. Some concepts, you're like, yeah, I got that. Frictional unemployment. I got that. The open market operations. But the best way to review is always practice multiple choice questions. I would not have a YouTube channel if it wasn't for you guys, and I mean that. I'm glad I'm able to help you guys. It's nice seeing these comments saying, like, you helped me out. Thanks so much. The truth is I made this for my students, and now as I'm teaching less and less, I'm doing this more and more online for you guys. But like, it's weird to me that there are, thousands of people watching and that you guys like my stuff. And I'll keep making it. Please keep watching my YouTube videos. I'm going to have a bunch of new cool stuff coming out, particularly, stuff that talks about practical application. Please share it with other people because obviously I'm a pretty small YouTube channel. But if you like it, maybe other people might as well. So thank you so much for watching my stuff. And as you know, until next time.